fund is funded by some local individuals. It's an interesting charity because the founders agreed to pay 100% of the administrative costs. So new philanthropic investments are 100% allocated to the project. So none of the money is going to pay for the administrative overhead. And the second thing they did was very much like the Stem Cell Institute, agree to organize themselves in a very different way, to focus on finding cures, to collaborate across institutions, to share their results in the open, and ultimately be willing to invest in scientists, individual labs, principal investigators, to be willing to invest in projects, to be willing to invest in for-profit companies to help on that problem of the absence of venture capital, and to be willing to play a role all the way down to and including delivery of drugs to patients. So Cure Alzheimer's Fund is at an earlier stage, Multiple Myeloma Research Foundation, with a woman named Kathy Giusti. They raised $150 million. They brought 4 drugs all the way to patients. They organized clinical trials. They recruited patients. They underwrote the basic science. And they did so in a context in which people might have a drug that would work for multiple myeloma, but the market was too small to finance an effort in a clinical trial focused on multiple myeloma. So again, it turns out in myelin repair and cystic fibrosis, in a wide range of disease areas, there are these new hybrid organizations who are prepared to give money based on outcomes, not on the nature of the company they're giving the money to, or the specific institution. They're as prepared to work with Mass General or the Stem Cell Institute as they are with a biotech company that might have been formed or a new venture. And in fact, I think they're going to play a much, much more important role over time. Now, often when I first met the stem cell guys, actually, it's an easier story to tell you about Bob Langer. So I first met Bob Langer. Bob had started 28 companies out of his lab. He's not new to this business. By the way, Bob couldn't get a job when he was relatively young. He became a food science professor at MIT, which was the lowest status other than janitor that you could have. But I think it sort of worked out. I asked Bob, I said, well, how much is your budget each year? And he said, well, it's $5 million. And I said, well, let me get this right. You have 2,000 people applying within your lab who are interested in taking and commercializing ideas. You've started 28 companies out of your lab, 16 of which have been financed by Terry McGuire Polaris Ventures. You've been able to come up with a wide range of innovations. How can it possibly be that you spend a quarter of your time kneeling at the altar of the NIH, writing grant proposals, dialing for dollars? How can that possibly be? That's the worst allocation of resources I ever heard of. Don't you know that there are wealthy people out there where $5 million, they can't even write a check for $5 million. Michael Bloomberg, the mayor of New York, has to give away $1 billion a year just to keep his net worth at $20 billion. It's shocking when you think about it. There turned out to be $200 trillion of global financial assets, the amount of money that's actually going to get devoted to philanthropic causes and to trying to make the world a better place, whether in life sciences or education or in the environment or in a wide range of problem areas. The amount of money available is going to be very, very large. And one of the things that all of the people in the science community are going to have to do is to get better at selling what they're doing and having it be viewed as a critical element of solving some major global problem. So if you think about healthy aging, if you think about all of the work that the Stem Cell Institute might do, or that the VEAS might do, or the Broad might do, in point of fact, that money is going to turn out to be ever more important. So how do you get access? How do you position the organization, or how do you position what you're doing to attract that kind of investment that's not going to have a direct financial return, but is going to accelerate discovery? I was also asked to talk a little bit about strategic investments. And I'm going to say that as risk-averse as the NIH has become, as risk-averse as venture capital has become, that also describes biotech and pharmaceutical companies. We have this great conundrum in pharmaceutical companies, which currently spend $70 billion a year, some number like that. By the way, what the hell do they get for their $70 billion? I'm a little confused because NIH spends $30 billion. I know what you all spend in your labs. I know what the productivity of those labs is. So I'm a little confused about the $60 billion. But they have become more risk-averse. They're actually waiting until there's real evidence from clinical trials. They don't want to invest before you've actually put something into patients. They want more proof. So in this structured experiment, they've opted out of a phase that they previously were willing to back, and they move further down the food chain. And what that's going to mean is that organizations like HSCI actually have to move the science further and de-risk some of those efforts in order then to be able to attract pharmaceutical money. It also turns out that pharmaceutical companies I sort of hate to say this because many people who graduate from the business school are guilty of this, but it turns out a pharmaceutical company is unpredictable. They may say we're interested in gastrointestinal something, and then a bunch of consultants come in from Bain, and they do a strategic reorganization, and there goes the whole stomach, just gone. Pain, gone. Cardiovascular, gone. Because some lame brain consultant, anyway, I train most of them, so. To be very careful, because it's not necessarily the case that though they have a very large amount of money, that they're predictable and that they're going to solve your problem. So you have to work carefully in that world to make sure that there's predictability to what you're doing. In fact, I think the cure in many ways is to provide predictability of funding to highly risky projects. That's the paradox, that we want higher risk projects, high risk, high return projects, but we want predictable sources of capital to fund them. And it's going to require a huge amount of creativity to be able to do that. Efforts like the Therapeutic Screening Lab at the Stem Cell Institute are intended to take targets further than you used to have to take them, to be able to de-risk and make it more likely that either a startup with a venture capital backer or a pharmaceutical or biotech company is going to play. So I'm going to stop there. We'll be happy to answer questions in a bit. All right. Welcome, everyone. So I'm building on Bill's talk. I'm going to talk a little bit about academic sources of funding for startups and ventures. And then I'm going to take that hat off and put on a different hat and talk about angel funding. So I'm with Partners Healthcare. A lot of you know Partners Healthcare, but in case you don't, it's a healthcare system with Mass General, Brigham and Women's Hospital, McLean Hospital, several of the Harvard-affiliated teaching hospitals, but not all of the Harvard-affiliated teaching hospitals. We try and be as confusing as possible. And it's I think our research budget for the last year was about $1.3 billion, which would make us a pretty medium-sized pharmaceutical company if we were actually focused on that research, which is focused on developing drugs, but obviously most of it is in basic research and other things. It is the largest academic biomedical facility in the world, with over 6,000 people employed in research, about 1.7 million square feet of space, and our projects are funded by a wide variety from industry, government, philanthropy, etc. So, building on what Bill said, if you talk about this is the money that's going into venture funds, and if you think the venture funds, they have to raise money that then they can invest in companies. Well, the money that's going into companies isn't too bad right now. It's okay, but if you look at the seed corn of the money that's going to be available over the next few years to actually go into those funds, and go into those companies, it's decreasing, and 2012 isn't looking much better. In addition to that, we're talking about how the VCs aren't making very much money. Well, the healthcare VCs really aren't making much money. And so within the fact that there's less money going into venture, they're saying, oh, well, we made money on Facebook. Let's go give those guys more money. But when's the last time we made 1,000x on a healthcare deal? Maybe we don't want to give that fund money. And you've seen a bunch of actually old, well-established brand name healthcare VC funds go out of business over the last couple of years. So it's a very difficult environment that we're in right now. It tends to be cyclical and not a good place in the cycle. So one of the responses the partners had to that was to create this innovation fund. So the Partners Innovation Fund, which is where I work, it's a $35 million fund. So it's not that big from a healthcare perspective, but it's enough to really start to catalyze some other people's money going into these projects. From a fundraising perspective, my job is pretty easy. I have two limited partners, Mass General and Brigham and Women's Hospital. And it's an evergreen fund. So to the extent that our IRR is greater than zero, our returns are greater than zero, then we have money that we can reinvest. And whatever we make, we reinvest. One of the things that I think that's quite important about our fund, because we are a corporate fund within an academic environment, there's a big question you can ask us to, okay, well, how do you make decisions, and how do those decisions get made? How do you know you're making the right decisions? Are you really just going to give this investigator, you're going to fund his company because he brings in millions of dollars of NIH money? And maybe it's not a good deal, but you're saying, okay, well, we want to make him happy. So we have an independent investment committee that looks over our shoulders and has to approve every deal that we do. These are people who come from, most of them are venture capitalists, they come from industry, other places, and they don't really care if this investigator brings in millions of dollars of NIH money. They don't want their name associated with a deal that's not very good. The other thing that they do is they make sure that they ask a lot of questions. These guys are not potted plants. So that when we go and say, okay, we want this deal approved, if we haven't done all of our diligence and everything that needs to be done, we won't get it approved. And so within the system, gives them a lot of comfort to say, okay, we're asking the right questions, we're doing the right diligence, we're making the right decisions. Because, venture fund within an academic environment, historically has not been a natural fit. So, some of the things that we do are a little bit different than you would find in a traditional VC world. One of the things that's different